On an individual level, who surprised me the most in terms of player growth? I think that Libero or Stitch come to mind as new players in the league that have shown that they have highly diverse hero pools and an ability to carry. And even though I wouldn't say necessarily growth, because this is their first season, over the course of the season, we've seen a lot of development from these players, and I'm excited to watch more of them as the playoffs progress. I think LW Blue is the favorite of this tournament. So as much as I like Lunatic High and as good as I see them at their diving strategies, I don't know if they have the strategic depth to necessarily win the tournament, even if they have been good enough to place top 4. Yeah, I think that when we look at Runner, it was his teammates and that seemed to be insisting that he plays those games. As I understand it, he does a lot of work and homework in terms of figuring out enemy teams, watching the footage, devising strategies, and he's also the main shot caller on the team. Does he occasionally have positional problems? Sure. We've seen him bounce out from behind Reinhardt shields and get hooked by Roadhogs, positions where a better Lucio player might not put themselves in, which can put the team at a disadvantage. But if he's the one crafting the strategies to go into the game, and he's the one calling the shots, then maybe you take that sacrifice because you'll be more coordinated as a unit, and he knows how to counter the enemy team. And we really honestly saw that very nicely, particularly against Lunatic High. When we think about the way that RunAway played Numbani point A defense, they had a very custom-tailored strategy to shut down Lunatic High's dive with great Torbjorn turret placement. And these are the things I think that he's bringing to the team, these observations, these plans. And his teammates seem most comfortable with him in the game enacting these plans in real time, even if his individual skill may not be at the same level as other Lucio players that are remaining in the playoffs. I think if you want to win, that you're going to put in a lot of time in order to be the best. And if he feels that that's the best use of his abilities to break down the other team's strategy, and he's got a great mind for the game, and he's going to be up quite a lot, not getting sleep and putting his all into this tournament. And I think that's probably a smart idea because Overwatch is just getting bigger and bigger around the world with the announcement that Overwatch League is starting in the third quarter of this year, with presumably this game is very popular here in Korea. We could see teams like SKT and KT, the Kespa squads picking up rosters soon, and RunAway is a team that could be bought out. These guys could make a very nice living moving forward, and to get those opportunities requires a lot of effort. So good for him, I guess. Oh, God. I would love to see a mini-map, which is coming. I know it's coming eventually. I think one of the biggest problems with spectating Overwatch right now, and also the biggest problems with setting it up as a narrative, as a caster, is sometimes you don't even know that a flank is happening. For example, if a team is waiting for a Reaper flank or waiting for a Soldier flank, if you can see it on a mini-map, first off, the observers will know where to put the camera better, and the casters will know how to set up the action. They will have an idea of what the play is coming so that you can more effectively judge the quality of the play that went in if perhaps the flanker went in too early and died too quickly. And some of these things right now are very difficult to see, or sometimes you can't see them at all until like a Reaper pops up in the back line and you're like, oh shit, there's that guy. I wish I would have known he was going in. So that's crucially important that we have a spectator minimap. Would love to see specific team colors that don't change, because when we have two teams that are constantly swapping back and forth between red and blue, it can be difficult to keep track of, hey, Kongduencia was just red and now they're blue on the next map, and it gets confusing. Sometimes as casters will make wrong calls as a result of that, and it's confusing to the audience as well. So not only red or blue, but even specific team colors would be good. Skins for the teams that are very easily identifiable as being a member of that team, or competitive skins that are a little bit brighter in their use of team colors would be extremely helpful. And part of it too is just going to be more practice from the observers to understand when to switch to a third-person viewpoint above the fight to track a battle, better integration of replays, for example, and this is all going to come in time. So these are all features that would be particularly nice to see, and we know that Blizzard is working on at least some of these, particularly the minimap right now. Well, first off, I think that Overwatch, especially from the DPS role, is significantly more mechanically demanding than most MOBAs. I think if we look at MOBAs, MOBAs rely, certainly you can have spectacular mechanics, and we see that from pro players all the time, but it's not at the same level of accuracy as you would see in basically any PC FPS. So I think that the ceiling is more on that mechanical ability in Overwatch, but what's so interesting to me about the game and why I'm a bit confused is that one of the greatest skills in a MOBA is being able to communicate with your teammates, keep track of enemy cooldowns, know where vision is on the map, and there's so many things you have to keep in mind in your brain at one time about positioning. And I think that's where most of the skill in MOBAs for professional players comes from. But in Overwatch, sure, you don't have items, you're not keeping track of item timers, you're not keeping track of as many cooldowns, and you're not keeping track of vision, but it does have an element of keeping track of still a significant number of cooldowns, especially since you're against 6 players instead of 5, and also having the opportunity to coordinate with your team around that. You still have to think about how your team's abilities interact with each other, how the enemy team's abilities interact with each other, how this is going to affect a team fight, and how you're going to play it, which are still the same skills that you see in MOBA. So to say that there is, I mean, maybe some players feel that way. I can't change how they feel, but from my perspective, there's still a pretty high skill ceiling. Even if you would say, okay, my mechanics are great, as a team, it's a very young esport and no one has really figured it out yet. No team, it's still way too new. And we're only going to see increasing coordination. And I think that's where you really have to take the next step in Overwatch as a player, is not focusing on the individual ability if your mechanics are already very good, but then moving on to something else. Well, Korea already is dominant right now. Now, whether Korea is part of the Overwatch League or they keep running Apex and running their own tournaments here and then come to international competitions is another question. But the other crucial piece of evidence to consider about dominant regions is the question itself. We know, factually, Overwatch League is not going to be region locked like League of Legends or other esports in the past, which means that, in theory, a team of 6 Koreans, for all we know, Lunatic High is going to go to Chicago and become Chicago's team. So the Koreans could still be dominant as a nationality, but they might be representing a North American city for all we know right now, depending on their desires, where the teams want to go, if new owners want to come in and bring these Korean teams over because of their strength. So I think it's very difficult to tell right now whether, I think Korean players are going to be excellent in this game for a long time, and teams of 6 Korean players will be dominant. Whether these are Koreans playing on Korean teams, or Koreans playing on European teams, or Koreans playing on Chinese teams, or Koreans playing on North American teams, I don't know the answer to that. What I will say, though, is that there is still a very strong group of pro players in the West, and we've seen them be able to compete at a top level with a lot of the Korean players, including Apex last season, NV1. That's unheard of for a foreign team to win a tournament in Korea, and they already pulled it off. I think one of the biggest issues in the West right now is because there isn't a league to practice for. A lot of the great talent that we have in the West is not regularly scrimming, really grinding like we see here in Korea with 16 teams in Apex, 10 teams in Challenger, where there's been a constant development. I think when Overwatch League starts and teams like Misfits and teams like Rogue and teams like Envious really return to a long-form practice regimen, that they're all going to encourage each other to get better, particularly if some of the Korean teams come over and are constantly practicing with them as well, say in North America or Europe. In that environment, I can see the West really holding their own against Korean teams and able to, I wouldn't say consistently pull out victories, but maybe occasionally.
Okay, I guess we're done.
Hey, thanks guys.
Thank you very much.